Hey there, public speaking. Welcome back to class. And today we're going to talk a little bit about telling a story. So, yesterday we went over the five elements of good storytelling about it being simple, emotional, truthful, real, and valid. And then, of course, I talked about Mr. Buckley's bonus, YOP, which, of course, we can't ever forget about YOP. Your YOP should always shine through. So we went over that yesterday and you kind of looked at it and thought about it a little bit. And today, what I want to do is I want to tell you a story. And while I'm telling this story, I want you to think about how do the five elements of good storytelling show themselves in the story that I tell you. Okay. So the story I'm going to tell you about has to do with summer camp. How many of you have ever gone to any kind of a summer camp at some point? Any camp at all, even when you were little or older? But many of us have participated in some sort of summer camp, whether it's a day camp or an overnight camp. Well, when I was in school, I absolutely loved going to camp. I did all sorts of camp in the summer. I would go to tennis camp. I'd go to church camp. I'd go to basketball camp. I'd go to canoe camp. I'd go to leadership camp. I'd go to anything that they would make a camp about. In fact, I was hardly ever home in the summer. My parents hardly ever saw me. Anyway, because I loved camp so much, I actually became a camp counselor. And as part of being a camp counselor, I had an awful lot of memorable campers. But the camper that will always stick out to me that I will never ever forget was Bruce. This was at a camp in middle of Wisconsin, Camp Lucerne. It was a United Methodist Church camp, and this was the camp. The week of camp that I was doing was middle school, and so I met Bruce at this camp on the first day. On the first day, he showed up at this outdoor rustic camp dressed in khaki shorts, a polo shirt. He had glasses, really thick glasses, really short hair, braces. And then his shirt actually had a pocket. He had a pocket protector in it. And then he had pens and pencils in the pocket. Now, remember, it was a rustic camp. But the best part that just kind of should have tipped me off to how unique Bruce was this homemade button that he was wearing that said, "Hi, my name is Bruce." So that's how I met Bruce. But I didn't see Bruce for the rest of the afternoon because the kids went out and they did all these different sorts of things. And we came back together for the first time as a cabin at dinner that night. So we're sitting at dinner, and someone said, "Hey, did you hear what happened to Bruce?" And I'm like, "No, what happened to Bruce?" Well, that afternoon was orientation. So in orientation, the cabin of kids go around to different places. They go to the canteen and find out how to use their money and what they can buy at the canteen. They go to the nurse's office to find out what to do if they are not feeling well or they get injured. They go up to the dining hall to find out what the procedure is to set up and clean up for all of our meals. And of course, they go to the beach to find out about the requirements of being at the beach, right? We all remember buddy check, right? So we had buddy check. But the other thing they had to do down at the water was they had to do the swimming test. Now, the swimming test at Camp Lucerne was really easy. Basically, all you had to do was you had to swim about 20 yards down, 20 yards back, and then you had to tread water for a minute. But treading water was really easy because the water was only about this high on you. So you kind of just crouched down, put your feet on the ground, and you just pretended you treaded water. And the reason I know this is because I used to be a camper there. I used to do the same thing. And I was determined to pass that swimming test so I could go out to the deep end and go off the dock. So anyway, I guess my cabin took off and they swam down and they swam back and they started treading water. And all of a sudden, Bruce said, "Help, help, I've got a cramp, I'm drowning." And everybody's like, "Hey, Bruce, just stand up, just stand up." And Bruce starts, help me, I'm drowning, I got a cramp." Like, "Bruce, stand up, help, help." He starts going underwater. The lifeguard had to dive into 4 feet of water to save Bruce. So that was his reputation leading into the camp. Now, Bruce was someone who was really annoying. We tell jokes in our cabin all the time, and Bruce would try to tell a joke, and it just was never ever funny. And in fact, it was kind of really annoying. But the worst part about Bruce was that he snored at night. So we could not even get to sleep. In fact, we came up with this master plan to take Bruce and his bunk out into the middle of the woods and drop him right there. We had it all set up, ready to go, and then it was foiled because the boys told some of the girls who told their counselor, Kim, and Kim got really, really mad at me and got the girls all freaking out. They were crying and bawling about how cruel we were and how terrible it was. So we didn't do that. But anyway, on with my story. So here's what happened. The way that this camp is set up is that you have off on one side is where the boys' cabins are, and about a half a mile away on the other side is where the girls' cabins are. And of course, the boys would go run over to the girls' cabins, and the girls would run over to the boys' cabins and raid the cabins, like all part of that kind of stuff. But down in the middle, about a quarter mile away, is where the bathrooms were. There were no bathrooms in our cabins. So if you had to go to the bathroom, you had to go down a quarter mile to the actual bathrooms. Now tell me, if you are a guy and you've got to go number one, are you going to walk a quarter of a mile down to a bathroom, or are you just going to find a tree and pee? That's what would happen. Most people would just go pee outside. But the problem was someone would pee here, someone would pee there, someone would pee there. And the next thing you know, you didn't know really where it was. And it'd be kind of, upwind from the cabin and start to smell when the wind would blow into the cabin. So in my infinite wisdom as a camp counselor and a former camper there, I created this thing called the DPP, the designated pee place. One place everybody pees, and you're all good. It's far enough away so that way it doesn't smell up the cabin and you know where it is, but you don't have to go very far. So one day after lunch, we were having flat on back time or feet on bunk time, whatever you call it. We were just resting and chilling out. And all of a sudden, I decided I had to go to the bathroom. So I went outside and Brett came with me. Now, Brett was like the most energetic, crazy camper around. In fact, I remember, I remember one day at the end of the night, we were in our circle praying before we were gonna go to bed in our cabin, and all of a sudden we hear some girls, and Brett, who's got his head down, also looks up, says, "Girls!" Runs over to the door, drop kicks the door open. The door flies open and hits his cousin right in the face, sent her to the emergency room with stitches. But anyway, Brett, we had a lot of energy. It was great, a lot of fun. He was out there with me, and we're talking, and all of a sudden Bruce comes walking out, and I'm just sitting there having this conversation with Brett, and all of a sudden I feel something on my leg, and I turn around, and Bruce is peeing on my leg, and I say, "Bruce, you're peeing on my leg," and Bruce just kind of looks up at me like, "Uh-huh." And that was it. That was the last straw I had had. I was so mad. I went down. I went down to the bathroom. I tried to wash it off. I can still remember the exact spot on my calf where he hit me. It was the grossest thing ever. But I was so mad at Bruce that I was done with him. This kid was obnoxious. He was annoying. He was a total loser. And so I couldn't wait for another few days to get by and get done with this week of camp. And honestly, we weren't that nice to Bruce. We gave him a hard time. We kind of picked at him. We made jokes, made fun of him. Um, and I couldn't wait for the last day. And when he left, I said, "Goodbye, Bruce. Have a great rest of your summer." And that was that. And I finished out the summer. And in February, the following February, I got a letter from Bruce. And that letter said, "Hey, Buck, hope you're doing well." I told me all these things that were going on in sixth grade for him, and he was doing well overall and having fun. And then he said, "Hey, Buck, I just want you to know that the week at camp was my best week, and you are the best counselor I've ever had." And when I read that, I felt really horrible. I felt awful about how I was treating Bruce, and that at that point, I made a commitment to say that whatever I did in life, when I was working with people, and in particular kids, I was going to treat them with respect and value because they were a human being that deserved to be valued. And that all of us, we have our idiosyncrasies, we have our quirks. We're all goofy in some sort of way. That doesn't mean that we make fun of people and make them feel bad. And so from that moment on, I committed myself to making sure that I would lift up people and I would be positive and encouraging and supportive. And I hope that you've seen that in what I try to do as a teacher. I value each and every one of you because you're a human being that matters. And that whatever we bring, whatever goofy stuff we bring, whatever cool stuff we bring, whatever baggage we bring, that's who we are. That's our yop. And that's what really matters. And your yop should be valued. So maybe more than just getting peed on that week, it set me up to learn a lesson that stuck with me forever. So now that's the Bruce story. A couple of things about that. Was it a pretty simple story? It was easy to understand what happened, right? Kid peed on me. Was it emotional? Absolutely. There's some emotion that came along with that, in particular, in how bad maybe we felt about Bruce and how bad I felt about how I treated him. Was it a truthful story? It's not a scientifically proven story. I don't have anybody here. I don't have evidence or video of him peeing on me, but it's true. And it should seem true. And again, it's a real firsthand experience. This is something that happened to me. This isn't, oh, I heard this story about a guy who got peed on. No, this happened to me. Um, and then, is it valid? Does it work for any audience? I think it does. I think it works for an audience of kids. I think little kids would find this funny. I think adults would find this humorous. I think it applies to a lot of people. And does my yop shine through? I think it definitely does in how I tell the story. But here's another thing about good storytelling that isn't listed right there. Let me tell you one more story. Won't take long. I was a camp counselor one year and I had this kid named Bruce and he was really annoying. He peed on my leg and I was so mad at him that I couldn't wait to get rid of him and I made fun of him and I was really mean to him. He sent me a letter a few months later where he told me I was a great counselor. I felt really bad about it and I decided that maybe I should treat people nicely. Is that the same story? Well, yes and no, right? It is the same story, but it didn't have the detail. It didn't have all of the elements of a good story. In the first story, the first way I told the Bruce story, it's likely you have some sort of a vision in your head of who Bruce was, right? And so a good storytelling really paints that picture for the audience. And that's what I want you to think about as you're starting to think about what's a good story for you to tell. I kind of just want you to think about that. Okay, so for your homework, you're not writing anything down, you're not deciding anything. But what I want you to think about is now that you've heard the Bruce story, what's a story that maybe you would be interested in sharing that could be funny, could be sad, it could be serious, but a story that you can tell, a story that meets the five elements of good storytelling. That's what I want you to think about. That's your homework, is to think about that. And then you're going to bring that to class tomorrow. So that's what we've got going on. And if you have any questions about this story or any questions about the elements of this story, feel free to email me. I'm happy to give you more perspective or more advice about it. But the biggest thing right now that I want you to think about is what's a great story that you can tell? All right. Hey, thanks a lot for listening. I know this took quite a while. I appreciate your attention and I hope that you're doing well. And I hope maybe you found a little bit of interest and excitement to this story. All right, thanks.